the acts that are covered by A10 are included in A2 and A3. The difference is it's a higher penalty. It's what we're seeing right now with ransomware. And I'll give you an example of this happened just recently in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The district attorney's office there, as well as the sheriff's office, was subject to a ransomware attack. The ransom that was requested was less than $1,000. And so what happened under these particular scenarios, these would be misdemeanors rather than classified felonies. And so what this bill does is it raises the penalty on ransomware regardless of the amount of damage or ransom that's being charged.
Thanks very much. Anybody else? All right, bills before us. And I appreciate the answers to those questions.
Mr. Chairman, I trust that Senator Sterling and I to work on this to get it right. So with that, I move that the bill be reported to Senate properly.
Second.
Read first. So moved and seconded before we refer to finance. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. Next. Senator Stanley? Sure. All right, we'll avoid pass it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 807, very simple bill. Actually, there's an amendment and interest substitute.
Number?
807.
All right. Now, the motion to adopt the substitute properly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The substitute before us.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a turn back into a very simple bill. What we're trying to do is realign from the 22nd district, where we have 5 slots for circuit court judges, back into the 21st district. For edification purposes, the 22nd district encompasses Pittsburgh County, the city of Danville, and Franklin County. The 21st district is Patrick County, Henry County, and the city of Martinsville. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, right now we have in the 21st, 2 circuit court judges serving 3 courtrooms. And the problem is that if we lose, we have one that's going to retire. He's had an illness. If we lose him, then we're going to have an overload of circuit court cases in Henry, Martinsville, and Patrick County. And the service, we just can't get them served. This is a request bill that comes from Judge Clark, Judge Martin Clark from Patrick County. Judge Clark has asked that I put this bill in. He's the one that's getting ready to retire with a health issue. He has discussed this, moving the slot from the 22nd to the 21st with the chief judge of the 22nd and all judges. They agreed that we're just doing this one time. The language we sort of changed the way we make these assessments back in, and we're just looking to do that. I can tell you this, that in Henry County, Martinsville,
Let me interrupt. We have the National Center for the Study of State Courts. We've agreed and adopted a process for determining the alignment of judges and the number of judges within circuits. Every year we have bills to about this, and I don't question Judge Clark, his judgment, the judgment of the adjoining circuit. It would be my hope that it would be reflected in the results of the National Center's study, and that we can adhere to our process. So as much as I'm loath to suggest that, I would sincerely hope we'll adhere to that process.
So, Mr. Chairman, what you're saying is you like my bill.
Love that.
So I have a chance then.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Senator Deeds.
The judge, the 5 judges on the second, there are only 4 judges appointed right now.
Mr. Chairman, and Senator Deeds, that is correct, there are 4.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator?
is it not possible that the judges can agree or the Supreme Court can move somebody in adjacent jurisdiction circuits sit in the other circuit currently?
Mr. Chairman, Senator McDougal, I don't know the answer to that. But right now, we have 3 judges. Judge Clark is one of 3 judges. This says only 2. We lose him, we only have 2. We won't get a third back. So whatever the process could be, I think, right now, Judge Clark sits in Patrick County, which has a very large docket, as you may know, in this area with high unemployment, high poverty rates, we also have high criminal rates and high uses of opioids, which are resulting in criminal charges. To relieve one of those judges out of the docket is going to create such a problem, because the other 2 judges, one sits in the city of Martinsville, one sits in Henry County.
I can tell you that I live and practice in the 26th Circuit, and the Supreme Court did assign a general district court judge from the 26th Circuit who relieves some of the burdens. So Senator Google may have a solution that's not legislative that allows us to adhere to the practice, and perhaps we can apply to the court on your behalf to write a letter asking the court to consider the needs of those circuits and the agreement that the judges. I'd be more than happy to help you with.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate any consideration, especially with the economic conditions that we have down there. Our court systems are unduly burdened sometimes, and we don't ask for much, but we like to keep what we need.
All right, is there a motion?
Move the report.
Second.
Been moved and
Second.
moved and seconded.
He did that.
Was there a substitute motion? Then substitute motion passes the bill by indefinitely with a letter to the Supreme Court. I will gladly write. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Any other bills?
But,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, who else do we have? Others, Senator Stewart. Senator Deeds.
Mr. Chair, would it be an appropriate time now to ask Senator Elder's bill to go out today?
No. I think if you only have one, and I think there's a lifeline available for that
Okay.
one that may save them a little bit of work.
Okay, first bill I've got from order is 1067. It comes to the request of the Winter Green Police Department, and simply adds private police officers employed by private police department to the section, the assault battery section, to allow for the enhanced punishment. I understand that there's an amendment to this bill that's been requested, I think, by Norfolk Southern. Unless there are questions, I'd like to call someone.
Anybody have any questions to Senator Deeds? What's your, just,
The amendment's right.
please? Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm Tim Bentley from Norfolk Southern. We are in support of Senator Deeds' bill and just wanted to offer amendments that would, in 2 places, expand the.
Tell you what, let's pass this bill by temporarily, and you can confer with Senator Deeds and pass it with council before we consider those amendments. Next bill.
1068 is the next bill. It's also comes from Wintergreen, and the problem they had there was, someone obtained a season ski pass from someone else, they overlaid a photograph on the pass, caught skiing on a holiday when it wasn't applicable. He was charged with, innkeeper fraud, and a skillful lawyer successfully convinced the judge that, the ski resort wasn't in. Wintergreen doesn't have an inn. So this, simply adds in this section, ski resort, or gain entrance to an amusement park or ski resort.
And I think maybe, when you have any thoughts as to whether that language is getting into a little bit of massaging.
Our suggestion, Mr. Chairman, was instead of putting it where it is, it's a little ambiguous there, gaining entrance to a ski resort. If the intent is to deal with people who have counterfeit ski lift tickets, we were suggesting language that was more specific. So our suggestion is to add a number 5, which would say, use a ski lift without having obtained a valid ski lift ticket.
Or pass.
Or pass.
That works.
And a cautionary note, we're saying ski lift ticket, I don't know if that's the correct technical expression, that might need to be developed with the ski resort people.
And Mr. Chair, that'd be found, I mean, the Wintergreen Police Department's on, they're taking their day off today, so I don't have anybody here. But I think that's fine. This bill probably needs to be for the finance, might have a fiscal impact, so it, if you would amend it, and I will certainly agree to work with you.
Well, first of all, let's, before we lose track of it, before Senator Stewart asked his question, so I don't think that this technical amendment or this amendment affects his question. Let's, Senator Dees moves the amendment, as Senator Dugal seconds the amendment. Any discussion of the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. Bill is amended. Senator Stewart.
Senator Dees, I'm just curious, looking at this, so it's class 1 misdemeanor, it's less than $200, and I assume a lift ticket is less than $200 a day. Most of the places I've ever been to, Virginia, isn't that already trespassing class 1 misdemeanor? So
I would have thought so, but apparently the argument that Ski Lodge was not, they were charged under this code section, and the artful lawyer was able to convince the judge in that area that Nelson County had
Well, because we're being on the ski resort is a wholly unrelated matter to being on the lift. You have to pay to be on the lift. You don't have the authority of the owner by virtue of the ticket to get on the lift. You're trespassing on the lift.
Mr. Chairman, that would be true, Senator Stewart, only if it were posted, no trespassing, or you had been warned previously.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Dugal.
Senator Dees, as you're looking at this, I had to make this comment on the myriad of other bills we've seen, but we have 0 money in our public safety and finance subcommittee. So any bill that has any money is facing an uphill climb, not on the speed limit, so, Mr. Chairman, if you want something that you pass, the felony provision makes it almost impossible that they'll ultimately lose that advice, because that adds the 50,000 which will come back. So you might want to reflect on that as you go back to your.
If you want to take that out, that's fine. My guess is, this is always a misdemeanor, my guess is that the problem with Wintergreen is probably a problem with other places as well. I checked with the homestead, and they may not have this problem, but it could be a problem somewhere else, some other ski lift.
Yeah.
Senator Dugal.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that, I think we're at the worst one, this is second, that any person who violates this section, you leave in, I guess, the lines 32 to 34 the way they are in code currently, and maybe put in any person who violates this section for purposes of the ski resort language shall be guilty of the class 1 misdemeanors. I think that would, I'd say, it's going to be the trip that might.
All right. All right. Is that your motion? Is there a second? Is there a piece? Been moved, the amendment's been moved and seconded. You have that? Kristen? All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, the amendment's adopted. Bill's before us. Been moved and seconded, the bill be recorded. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Bill's recorded.
The third bill I've got comes from, it's 1072, it comes from the state police, and it adds a new section, 370.6, which would include out-of-state federal convictions to those that prohibit certain persons from being in proximity to children. Currently, 3 of the proximity statutes are only about Virginia convictions. As it currently stands, the law prohibits certain persons from being in proximity to children. For example, a person convicted of rape of a child under the age of 13 is a victim in Virginia. Would be prohibited if the conviction was in New York. But he would not, if the conviction was Virginia, he'd be prohibited from proximity. If it was in New York, he would not be. This bill aims to fix that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Floyd, I'm sorry, state police first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ian Pope with the Virginia State Police. We want to thank Senator Deeds for putting this bill forward for us. What this bill does is address what Virginia law already sees as a public policy consideration, that sex offenders not have unrestricted access to children, and take that just from Virginia offenders to also extend it now to offenders who have their convictions in other states or under federal law. We believe that this bill also serves to correct what is now an incentive for offenders who have their convictions in other states to actually, child sex offenders, to actually move into Virginia. Because right now there are 27 states that have blanket restrictions on where such offenders can reside, and if they are able to relocate to Virginia to avoid those restrictions, then that creates an incentive for them to do so. So this bill will correct that as well.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who wishes to speak in favor? Mrs. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, city members, Mayor DuBois. So this bill doesn't just expand one felony statute, it expands upon 3. I do not oppose the employment portion of this bill, but I have serious concerns with every other part of the bill. Felony should require an intent to commit a crime, mens rea. But this bill makes a person's mere presence, including living in their own house, walking on a public street, sidewalk, park, or parking lot, a crime, a felony. 20 years worth of research that I regularly share with everyone here includes, yeah, I sure can.
So, for Virginia, somebody convicted of these crimes in Virginia,
Yes.
is already included.
It is, and it's broken down by a year, which is another problem, which I'll get to in a minute.
Let's take one at a time.
Yeah.
So, what this is doing is treating, I hear you,
Yes.
but isn't this a bridge we've already crossed?
So it's being applied retroactively?
I'm not talking about the dates, I'm talking about application and your mens rea.
Right.
And that is a bridge we've already crossed.
It is. It is.
So it's a policy question.
It's a policy
As to
question.
whether we want to apply it.
If you want to expand upon it, knowing the last 20 years worth of research.
Everybody understand that? Okay. Got it.
We good?
Got that. How about the dates?
Perfect. I can get to that if that's where you want to skip to. So, the Virginia residency and loitering laws, again, I have no issue with the employment. Working at a daycare or school, I completely agree with. So there is no conviction date of 2017 in this bill. So that means that the state police will apply it retroactively as far back as 2000. The loitering laws go back to 2000, 2006, and 2008. The residency restrictions go back to convictions from 2006 and 2008. And our working employment at schools and daycares goes back to 2006. So if a conviction date is not added of this year, there will be people who currently live in a residence that is registered. They are on the state police registry, and that could become a felony on July 1st where they live today because they're not being grandfathered in. So we could have people that are being arrested and charged and homeless.
So,
Yes,
and I hear you.
Yes.
And I understand that.
yes.
I guess there's maybe two ways, maybe Mr. Benjamin can help with this. And I want to be dismissive of your concerns.
Sure.
Number one would be to make effective going forward,
Yes.
as you suggest.
Perfect. Love it.
But number two would not be also probably second best in your view, maybe third, I don't know, but to give a period for people to bring themselves into compliance.
That would be great, but if they're already registered there and they haven't had any issues and their conviction's 17 years old, are we really going to evict them from their home? You're saying yes?
No, I'm
Okay.
saying you don't
No, I,
read it in. I'm saying those are valid points that you ought to consider.
thank you. So one of my questions was, when the first version of this bill, which is the House version, came up, is I submitted a FOIA asking the state police how many people would be impacted by this, for out-of-state convictions, for military convictions, and Senator Deed's version is Native American Indians as well. So are we talking 5, 50, or 5,000? And I have the FOIA from the state police from 4 weeks ago, and they could not pull the data. So we actually do not know how many people this will affect. And if we're proposing to direct this at a particular group of people, especially if we're going to go back in time, shouldn't we know how many people are going to be prohibited from loitering, from residing, and the working isn't an issue for me, because no one's working at a school today that's on our registry.
Mary, I think that Senator Deeds has listened to you,
Yes.
and I think he is willing to take this by
Good day.
for the day until Wednesday and talk with you and the state police,
That's perfect.
particularly with respect to the retroactivity portion of this, and see whether those concerns can be addressed. Okay?
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Is that okay, Senator Deeds?
But I've got that first bill that went back temporarily with Norfolk Southern
You
Amendment.
good on that?
I'm good on the amendment, yes.
All right.
It simply adds railroad agents, railroad conservators, railroad police to the statute.
And I did mention this, but for patrons and committee members, and I will send a notice out to all of the patrons of bills, so not picking on Senator Deeds, but if you have amendments or substitutes, please get them to committee council 24 hours in advance of the meeting, so that we can process it through our
police officers or conservators, I don't know how many people that amounts to.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the amendment? So
I think a motion.
so moved and second that we adopt the amendment. Go ahead, address the amendment or?
We're expanding, Mr. Chairman, we're expanding the penalty for assaulting an individual, putting in mandatory minimum penalties. At least if you're convicted of assaulting, you can get 6 months based on guidelines. And guidelines come back and say 6 months. They assaulted in law.
That's statutory.
So with the assaults to individuals who are operating rail cars, or I hear what you're saying, I was not sure why we're putting in a 6-month mandatory minimum, and I'm almost confident this is going to increase the impact upstairs, which will make it even more, but, why would we want to be including this group there?
Mr. Chairman, Senator McGill, thank you. What this does, the Virginia Code carves out 2 protected classes of railroad police. So you have railroad police agents under 353, then you have a conservator of the peace for all the train crew members. Our main goal here is to make sure that if we're expanding the protection to include private police departments, that we include our uniformed police officers under 353. That's our primary goal. It's a very small population of individuals here in the Commonwealth. It certainly seemed that since the crew members were given protection under 354, that if we could include them, it would be beneficial, but we could. Our primary focus is 353, just to make sure that if we're expanding protection to include private police departments, that we're not leaving railroad police out, because railroad police are always dealt with separately from private police departments.
Mr. Chairman, maybe my question is why we explain it to private police departments, because it's a little further than the initial inquiry.
Well, I understand this was a specific request from the 3 officers that comprise the Winter Green Police Department, who have to have just as much, I guess, responsibility that as any police department anywhere, with respect to enforcing the law and when it's resort. And their concern was that they think they're entitled to the same protection other law enforcement officers.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
How many private police departments are there in the Commonwealth?
That I don't know.
I think that's 9. I think we fixed that bill a year or 2 years ago. We added Quiet Harbor and all those. I think there's 9.
Mr. Chairman, do you know where they are?
Mr. Chairman, I know Quiet Harbor, there's one towards Charlottesville as well. They were all in that original SCOPS legislation that we had to fix that.
Okay, Committee Council has a list.
Quiet Harbor, Babcock and Wilcox, Bridgewater Airport, Carillion Police and Security Services Department, Kingston, Kingsmill, Lake Monticello, Massanutten, and Winter Green.
Well, there's a motion to amend. Let's dispense with that first. Properly second, all in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Right, the bill is amended is before us. Is there a motion? Is there a good one? You want to make a motion? Okay, anybody want to make a motion? Said aye. It's been moved and seconded to report the bill and re-refer to finance as amended. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Resolution goes.
867. And, Mr. Chairman, what this bill does is it clarifies, make sure that the ambulance or billing service for the ambulance has a lien in a claimant's case. It is now unsure or uncertain, and that's all that does. So if you toting somebody in an ambulance, the billing service actually has a lien, you get paid for that. Right, John?
Yes, it's a, John Ayers is with the Virginia Trial Lawyers Association, very small little thing that got kind of that changed a few years ago when they took like ambulance out of the code and then called it emergency medical transport service. All this change does is allow some of these ambulance services, especially volunteer ones, have an agency that does the collecting for them. So this allows the ambulance service or its agents to be able to go ahead and assert that lien. Very small change.
So some court has refused to enforce that lien?
Well, yes, and sometimes plaintiff's attorneys are like, well, you're not the right party to be able to do this, I don't have to give you the $200.
This is it written in a fashion that it only applies to emergency transport and not if you were being transported from one facility to another. It's not emergency. Does that make sense?
It actually is.
It says emergency medical services provider agency.
What are those called? I don't even.
It says, under current law, transportation provided by emergency medical services vehicle. Now, I suppose that priority medical transport or something, or, Acme ambulance, even a private service, is an emergency medical services vehicle, whether it's providing transportation from hospital to nursing home or nursing home to home. I don't know, does council have thought on that?
Well, I guess my answer, Mr. Chairman, would be the same to Google. Regardless, they gotta get paid. If they are required, if the person requires that type of transportation, transportation service gotta get paid.
All right, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the Ed Rose, Virginia Association of Rescue Squads and the Virginia Ambulance Association, and they have shed a little light on the senator's question. There's two types of transport, emergency transport and non-emergency transport. So, when it comes through to the, commercial services, if you come to a third party, to go to, we'll say, a hospital, pick up somebody, take them to a nursing home, or go to a home, take them to the doctor. This non-emergency transport is still, classified as a transport. Emergency transport or emergency call could come through the 911 system.
But it is, the statute under current law and has changed, doesn't distinguish between the type of call as the type of provider.
Right, I think the way this read was, it needed to be the agency and not the vehicle.
This gets at that issue of the agency. It doesn't, it's not your intention to change the types of providers that are covered by this. All right?
That's correct. It's allowing a billing agency to submit.
You don't believe that it changes the types of agencies?
I don't think it does. I don't think it changes the type. It allows the billing agencies to submit the bills and have a lien.
I don't think it changes.
All right. Bills before us. So moved and second, bill be reported. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, bill before us. Next bill.
All right, I'll be plenty of orders up there. Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 870, what that does very simply is it encourages people to file electronically if the clerk's office has an electronic filing system by charging $5 for file by paper.
So let me ask this question, and maybe somebody on behalf of the clerks would be so kind just to step up and explain this. So right now, we are charging fees based on functional cost of services. At least clerks have adjusted to that as being cost. So what this is going to do is, you know, if somebody non-lawyer comes and has a filing that they need made and aren't sophisticated enough to utilize the clerk's filing system, we're going to punish them and charge them an extra $5 for using the system that we've already priced out and charge them $5 more just for filing in person. Right?
Chairman should additionally have the clerk. So the history of this is that in 1996, General Assembly saw fit to establish a fee for establishing the e-filing system, both for court records and land records. We went through about a decade where those fees were collected, and over that time, the systems have been built. So what's happened now is a logistic problem of being able to e-file. When you paper file, the clerk has all the land records laid out on the counter. And when you e-file, those e-filing cover sheets have to be printed and put in the list of deeds so that the clerk can make sure anybody doing title rundown can be able to do that. So right now, there's really a disincentive to e-file because of logistics, number one, and also the fact that you're charged a $5 fee to e-file, which is more efficient. And so what the General Assembly did 2 years ago was you flipped it for court records. And you said that if you e-file court records, they're already in Adobe format, they're PDFs, it's easier for the clerk, it's easier for the litigants and everybody else. So right now we have a policy of e-filing and encouraging e-filing of court records and discouraging paper filing of court records. But we still discourage e-filing of land records and encourage because you can pay no fee at all for paper if you land record file. So all we're trying to do is reconcile the two policies of the General Assembly in that respect. We think e-filing is the way to go. So what we'd like to do is no fee. We'd like to eliminate the fee on e-filing of land records like we've done on court records and have that fee apply to paper, but only when the clerk has an e-filing system. So for the vast majority of the populations that come in through attorneys or title companies, other people that are familiar with the land record process. And so as a result of which, all the stakeholders have been consulted and support this bill. And we're not aware of any opposition to the bill.
So you're cutting the fee for electronic filing.
Correct. We're eliminating the fee for electronic filing and shifting that fee to paper filings, which is basically what General Assembly saw fit to do with court records 2 years ago.
Mr. Chairman, when I first looked at this before I grasped exactly what they're trying to do, I think I shared some of the concerns. This is very similar to what we did with DMV a couple of years ago, when we said, if you're already coming in for another valid purpose, like driver's license, we're not charging you for your registrations. But if you come into a service center, get your registration, we'll charge you $5. And it drove over 2.5 million processes online or in the mail, which saved this body literally millions and millions of dollars because we didn't have to have increased staff to do it. So this sounds like a logical process to me that will hopefully mean that people can get access to things quicker and that we won't have to spend additional money for the clerks to do the job that we require them to do.
Senator Stewart said he was
Any other questions?
Senator Stewart said he was doing this because it's logical. So.
Do you ever know me not to care logical?
Just wait.
Mr. Chairman.
I didn't ask Senator Stanley.
Mr. Chairman, I thought we were going over those radical bills one by one again, so.
It's been moved and seconded, the bill be reported, all in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed? I just, I don't see anybody wanting to speak to that.
Chairman, what Senate Bill 879 does is it requires circuit court judges on the recall list, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has a recall list of retired circuit court judges that he can activate to sit as a substitute judge in circuit court. Those are typically retired judges. What this bill says is, just like any other judge that sits, is we have to qualify them every 3 years. Now, the amendment, and the Chief Justice brought this to my attention, and I think this is an amendment that makes sense. The amendment would say, notwithstanding the provisions of subsection A, the Chief Justice may call upon and authorize any judge of the circuit court whose retirement becomes effective during the interim period between regularly scheduled sessions of the General Assembly to sit and recall either to hear a specific case or cases pursuant to the provisions of Section 17.1-105. Such designation to continue in effect for the duration of the case or cases, or performed for a period of time not to exceed 90 days at any one time. Such judicial duties in any circuit court as the Chief Justice shall deem in the public interest for the expeditious disposition of the business of the court. And it puts in the delayed enactment clause until July 1, 2018. And the reason is because we're going to have a flood of these judges that we've got to qualify.
So, you move the amendment?
I move the amendment, Mr.
All right. The amendment's been moved. Is there a second? So moved and seconded. All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The amendment is adopted. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, all it does is it just means we need to qualify these judges that are sitting. Some of them are sitting almost as a full-time judge after they retire in other jurisdictions, in the same jurisdiction. And I think it is incumbent upon this General Assembly to qualify them just like we qualify every other judge. We all have to be held accountable.
Anybody wish to speak to this bill?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Dean.
I'm torn by this bill because I think that some qualifications need to be checked. But I live in a part of the area, part of the circuit that the General Assembly seems fit to not provide many judges. We have substitute judges almost every day in courts in Bath, Highland, and Allegheny. Bath and Highland will have judges every day. And for $200 a day, we're going to force these guys to move down here to be qualified every 3 years. And I don't know if that's realistic. I don't know if that's realistic to require them to do it. I'll probably go against it.
And Mr. Chairman, frankly, that's a lot of the reasons why I think we need to qualify, because we have retired judges who are sitting, they're running dockets in certain areas, and they need to be qualified just as any other judge.
Senator Stewart, let me ask you, in conjunction with Senator Dean's question, the compensation that's being paid to retired judges is not just $200 a day.
It's their retirement as well.
Which is conditioned, the increased retirement, my understanding is conditioned on their willingness to serve as substitute judges.
I cannot speak for that. I can't answer that question.
I mean, it was stated that.
In all honesty, I have no answer to that.
Do we have any idea how many substitute judges there are?
Sorry. Yes, you know.
Christy Wright, Office of the Executive Secretary, Supreme Court. These are retired recall judges that would sit in the circuit court. There's approximately 100 on that list right now. And right now the requirement there's an obligation to serve as on the recall list until age 70.
Mr. Chair, this only applies to certain court judges. I mean, I've got general district courts that are run by retired judges.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. The bill is only drawn to the circuit court judges. And part of that was, I had to say this, you know, in Virginia, we get a second bite at the apple. So you get an automatic right of appeal from the general district court to the circuit court. There was a thought to including the general district court judges as well, but I thought maybe we would try this first and see, and maybe at a later date we would expand it if we thought we needed.
All right, Senator Perdue.
I'd also say for general district juvenile and substitute judges as well, so it's a little different. And I knew to report.
Okay, so moved and seconded for the bill as amended, all in favor? And let me find out, does anybody wish to speak in favor of this bill? Anybody wish to speak in opposition to this bill? Or comment on it? All right, so moved and seconded, the bill as amended be reported, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Aye. All right, bill reports. Next bill.
Mr. Chairman, next bill is Senate Bill 1054, and this bill does two things. In section 15.2-1716.1, it talks about the reimbursement expenses. 1054, I thought. My numbers may be wrong. Oh, it's not? I apologize. 1055. Sorry, I'm
1055.
not illogical. Our 1055, Mr. Chairman, what that bill does is it increases the punishment from a Class 3 misdemeanor to a Class 1 misdemeanor if you refuse to leave the scene of a riot.
Now,
These series of these bills comes from one of my sheriff's departments that deals with each of these.
let me point out, and I will disclose that I guess the nominal owner of the piece of property that was damaged in a quote-unquote riot. But I want to point out a couple of concerns about this. Number one, it would punish someone for simply being present at an unlawful assembly in the same manner as somebody who's actively participating in it. Also would point out that it may actually cover a member of the media who's covering a unlawful gathering as opposed to somebody who's participating.
And you may be right, Mr. Chairman.
Comment on the record.
You may be right, Mr. Chairman. I didn't think I changed the substance of the statute. I thought I just changed the function. But I'm always going to stand corrected.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Stewart is correct. He's not changed the substance of the statute, but because it increases the punishment, the chairman's concerns, I think, are noteworthy. But there's an easy fix. Virginia Code 15.2-1714 exempts media from, and that's the provision that permits the police to establish a yellow tape zone, and contains language that exempts the media and also exempts any person charged by law with the responsibility of rendering assistance. And so if we inserted that same language in dash 407, then we don't have the media concern involved.
And Mr. Chair, it's not my intention to change the law here. It's just to make it a different punishment. I would point out to the chairman that it says anybody who has been ordered to disperse, if it is a lawfully ordered to disperse, I'm sorry, if it is an unlawful assembly. And so I'm really not trying to change the law here, just the punishment. But I'm fine with the amendment too. That's the pledge. Or you can kill it, it's up to you.
Senator Sasslaw.
What constitutes a riot?
I'm waiting for a technical legal definition.
You know it when you see it?
I know when I see it.
Mr. Chairman, it's defined in 18.2-405.
Sure.
Any unlawful use by 3 or more persons acting together of force or violence which seriously jeopardizes the public safety, peace, or order is a riot.
So, policeman,
Senator
Mr.
Sasslaw.
Chairman, the policeman determines that there's possible endangerment to the public, that
threatens public safety or any public interest.
Mr. Chair.
That's the definition in the code.
Senator Lucas.
Yes, for Senator Milligan, Yolanda, that is, she would ask this question. Would a simply, Black Lives Matter constitute a right?
They could fall into the category if they were violent, threatening force, or public injury or threatening public safety. Just like any other group.
That's any European or South American soccer.
And again, Mr. Chairman, I'm not changing the law. This is already the law. We're just asking to switch it from a class 3 to a class 1 misdemeanor.
Bill before us. Anybody wishes to defend the bill? Anybody wishes to get opposition to the bill?
Claire Castellaga, on behalf of the ACLU of Virginia, we're headed to the Senate that really has some concerns about these bills and the further criminalization of dissent.
Julie Emery with Virginia Civic Engagement Table. Martin Luther King Jr. said true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. These bills seem to mistake the former for the latter. We would oppose all of these bills.
Thank you. All. Right, anybody else?
Scott Price for Alliance for Progressive Virginia. We have the same concerns and we oppose all of these bills. We're in a situation right now where our nation is heading into uncharted territory, and it is really, really important that citizens have the right and the opportunity to express themselves, even through such things as civil disobedience. When we raise the punishments for these, in particular financial punishments, one of the things we're saying to people who are participating in acts of civil disobedience or direct action is that you can't do this unless you have the bank account to allow you to deal with that kind of punishment. What we want to do instead is encourage citizens to be active and to be out in public telling authority what they believe. And we have to feel these bills will have a chilling effect. Thank you.
Hi, Josie Mace with New Virginia Majority, and for the reasons that Julie Emery and several other colleagues have mentioned, we oppose these bills 1055, 56, 57, and 58.
All right, anybody else wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I will tell you that I did have somebody here in support of this bill, and that would have been the captain of the police force that asked me to carry these bills, but I don't see him in here, so just let the record know there was one person here that did support these.
Mr. Chairman, I have serious concerns as well, and specifically as it has to do with this Women's March that's coming up. When you have a crowd that large, there will always be the appearance of some maybe disorderly conduct, when in fact people may just be exercising their right for civil disobedience. In that situation, we're gonna have a whole lot of people with a criminal record for just doing what is their right to do, and that is a peace of something. So for that reason, I will be voting no on any bill that looks like this.
All right, committee operates 5 motions. Motion has been made to report Senate Bill 1055. Let's just call it all. Senator Saslow? Senator Norwood? Yes. Senator Howell? Senator Lucas?
I have an answer that I'd like to add to it, but I can't say it in this room now.
Senator Edwards? Senator McDougal? Yes. Senator Stewart?
Yes.
Senator Stanley?
Yes.
Senator Reeves?
Yes, Madam President.
Senator Chapin?
Yes.
Senator Dees?
No.
Senator Stern?
Yes.
Senator Overstreet? Yes. 8. passes 7-4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
I
Chairman,
just, Mr. Stewart, this probably will not be the last discussion on that one.
I agree. What's your next one? Did you send that to Hines? Is that the
Yeah, because it's class 1 misdemeanor, so it doesn't have a wood.
I just want to make sure that was in the motion.
So, that's what most people didn't hear, you have to finance him because it doesn't have it's not a felony, it doesn't have the woodroom impact that we have in capital.
Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 1056 is very similar to the last bill that we heard, and probably will have similar sentiments for those who voted one way or another. But it does the same thing, increases a class 3 misdemeanor to a class 1 misdemeanor for those who fail to obey police orders regarding police lines or barricades, which have been established with proper authorization.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to suggest an amendment on line 13, after the word person, I would insert not exempt under 15.2-1714. That is the statute that exempts news information gatherers.
I would move that amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Amendment has been moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed, that amendment is adopted. Speakers in favor?
I had one, Mr. Chairman, but I believe that was the captain of the police force who asked me to carry these bills. He had the lead.
Mr. Chairman, President Graziano, on behalf of the ACLU Virginia. On this bill, in addition to our general concerns about further criminalizing dissent, any person violating the provisions of the act, which is crossing a perimeter or barricade, would include anybody at the Christmas parade in Richmond who runs across the street between floats and crosses the barricade to do that, or at the most recent World Championship bicycle races, or any place where you've got things barricaded and there's a police line, if you will. And I just don't really think we want to make the parents and kids who are strolling across in violation of this class 1 misdemeanors. So I would encourage you not to go this direction.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This takes me back to 1969 when my husband and I were in Mexico at the Plaza of the Revolution at the time. This is me, this is in Saslo, okay? We were down during what turned out to be massive student demonstrations, and we just happened to be there, quite literally happened to be there, when the whole plaza was surrounded by police with fixed bayonets, and there we were in the middle. I could see how people could inadvertently get into this kind of situation. My husband and I actually had to walk past the fixed bayonets to get out of a demonstration we had no intention of being in the first place. I think when you start raising penalties for things like this, you're really possibly trampling on people's rights, but also you could be sweeping in a lot of innocent people.
This doesn't create a new crime. It already exists, and what it does is, the example, and I have great admiration for Claire, but the example that she gave where you run between the float, you're about as likely to get cited for that as you are for jaywalking. And everybody here knows it. And so I don't have the problem with this that I had with the other bill. So I would move to repeal the report.
All right, there's a motion to report. Is there a second? Second. Senator Stewart, second.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duggan.
Mr. Chairman, if Senator Sassler would love to come out to the northern neck, we don't have anything like jaywalking out there, so you can't get cited. I'm sure he's never seen that. Mr. Chairman, this one gives me I feel a little different about this one. I'll want the negative direction.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Let's call the roll.
Senator Sazal.
Aye.
Senator Norman. Senator Howell.
No.
Senator Lucas.
No.
Senator Edwards. Senator McDougal. Senator Stewart.
Aye.
Senator Stanley. Senator Reeves.
Yes.
Senator Chapin.
Yes.
Senator Dees.
No.
Senator Sirleaf. Senator Obenshain.
No.
40 days, 7 days.
All right, Bill fails to report.
Okay, one more. Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 1057. And this bill, again, does not create any new crimes. It enhances the penalty to a Class 5 felony from a Class 6 felony if anyone is injured, including a premeditated injury on the person of another when they are riding, essentially.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Dillon?
Senator Sasslaw.
So, let's say I'm in something is declared, definition to be revived. And, I throw a stone and it breaks the window. You think that's worth 5 to 10 years in prison? I'm there.
Already get 5 now, I think this would bump it up, right?
10.
Yeah, bump it up beyond that.
That's a little harsh for throwing a brick through the window.
Mr. Chair.
You know.
Hopefully the judge would take that into consideration, but it gives the judge broader authority when you have someone who commits a premeditated injury on someone that they don't have now.
Mr. Chair.
My concern is, of course, I'm not able to go to the Women's March, but if I were in a position to do it, I would.
You'd be riotous.
I would not be right, but if somebody says gun, I'm gonna run, and I'm gonna run over somebody, and a lot of other folks will as well. You can get caught up in a situation where somebody says the wrong word, or does something that frightens people, and then there's gonna be a stampede, and somebody's gonna get hurt, and you're gonna send me to prison because I'm gonna run over somebody trying to keep myself from getting killed. I think this is bad.
Mr. Chairman, I think with all due respect to Senator Lewis, who I love, this is
I
not,
love you too.
this bill is, you just don't love my bill. This is not designed to prosecute people who commit accidents. This is designed to commit people who are riding, tear your house down, or seriously injure somebody. And again, the law is the law. I'm talking about punishment here.
This does not change the substantive aspects of the law, it increases the penalty.
Correct.
Even though this says 0 physical impact, it's gotta have some physical impact if it does. And I would say to Senator Stewart, we've heard a number of bills here today that are going to have a physical impact. Some that I think are addressing some pretty significant public safety concerns that we don't have the money to deal with. I mean, so that they're not valid. I would suggest that maybe this, even though I know it's important, it doesn't rise to the level of some of the other offenses that we've seen so far, and I'm sure we're going to see on Wednesday.
And not to interrupt you, Senator McDougal, but I'm assuming that that police department that you and I represent together, I think that's why they asked me to get it.
I'm sure that they would prefer it in their compensation as opposed to being spent in a new offense as well. Chip, you asked about the year.
Right, so move to pass the bill by indefinitely, properly seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, bill is passed by indefinitely.
Mr. Chairman, I've been asked to carry SB 1058 by for the day.
What is that?
That's blocking a highway by a ride.
All right, without objection, that'll go back in the day.
Thank you.
If I could change places with you. I think I've got a couple of bills. Actually, before we do that, we have, Jeff, legislation that is recommended by our trust and estate session, and as I mentioned, unless anybody has any objection, I would ask Mr. Howard to explain this briefly.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Committee. Jeff Palmer, on behalf of the Virginia Bar Association. Unless you think this legislation has anything to do with decanting wine, it is not. Decanting in the trust arena deals with moving assets from one trust to another trust, and that may be beneficial in the instance if you're updating the terms of a trust because of a disability that's taken place in the meantime. Virginia already has a decanting statute. This would adopt the uniform trust decanting statute because in many instances, trusts involve property that is in other states or trusts are moved from other states. Farhad Agnew from Williams Mullen, who practices in this field, is here to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Well, Ms. Palmer, welcome, thank you for being here. Are you aware that any opposition to this bill?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have any questions about decanting and the uniform decanting legislation? I didn't think so.
Is there a problem now? I mean, I don't know.
No, there's no problem now. Really, the idea is that we have an existing statute, a uniform trust decanting statute was adopted, and so I was to put it in line with that. There are a number of procedural enhancements, but really nothing's changed.
And part of the advantage of that, if I'm not mistaken, is to create some uniformity among the states so that trusts created in different states are going to be subject to the same decanting rules.
That is exactly right, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any further questions? Hearing none, is there a motion on Senate Bill 913? Second. Moved and seconded that Senate Bill 913 be reported. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thanks very much. I appreciate your carrying the ball on that. If I can, I'll turn the Senator Stewart. First, I've got Senate Bill 903. Senate Bill 903. You may recall that a couple of years ago, we had a robust discussion. Delegate Leftwich on the other side, and I carried legislation that was in conflict with each other, dealing with fiduciaries having access to online data. For example, the situation that brought this to the fore was a highly publicized case in which a father was trying to gain access to his deceased son's social media account, and questions arose over what's the law going to be governing that? And we passed legislation in Virginia that was really groundbreaking. It was at odds with the Uniform Law Commission's recommendations, and we took the position that the Uniform Law Commission perhaps hadn't considered certain aspects. And in the couple of years since the passage of that legislation, the Uniform Commission and commissioners have gone back and revisited the uniform law, and they have revised the uniform law to make it more consistent with the approach taken in Virginia. So this year we are bringing the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, which is largely consistent with the law that we passed here in Virginia 2 years ago, which creates the mechanism and framework that governs how fiduciaries and whether fiduciaries are going to be able to gain access to the decedent's digital assets, whether it's bank account information, Flickr photographs, or Facebook or Twitter data. And it follows the same basic paradigm that we adopted, number one, requires the provision of online tools for the owner of the account to designate whether they give permission for a fiduciary after their death to access their account. In the absence of that, or in the absence either of that tool or the use of that tool by the owner of the account, it allows the decedent to have determined access by will or other testamentary document, or in the absence of that, the rules provided in the Uniform Statute will govern, and that divides the assets into catalog information and actually content information, and it sets forth the rules, allows executors to obtain catalog information, which is basically the information necessary to discern the existence of accounts, for example, a bank account, or recipients of or senders of emails, but it does not allow the access to content without utilization of those other means. This, we believe, is consistent with federal law and is going to allow Virginia to adopt a procedure consistent with other states that are adopting the Uniform Act. And so far as I know, there's no objection to this. And the parties who were at odds 2 years ago, I believe, have reached a consensus that this is the approach.
Any questions of Senator Obenshain with regard to Senate Bill 903? If not, anybody like to speak in support of it? If you would, come on up, please.
Good morning, Jeff. I'm back with AOL and Motor Technology Council. We are very supportive of this. The Uniform Law Commission, you recall, in advance a couple of years ago, a problematic bill that put providers under a real pickle between federal and state law. As a result of what we did here in Virginia, we went back to the drawing board with the Uniform Law Commission and came up with a bill that's before you. This has been enacted in a couple dozen states, and we expect it to be a 50-state enactment by the time it's all through. Something that's agreeable, privacy advocates, and industry folks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Come on up if you'd like to speak.
Very briefly, Reggie Jones, representing Facebook and AOL, and we certainly appreciate the fact that other states are now getting in line with what y'all wisely did in Virginia. And I think it's really good to do that way, and I think this is support.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr.
Chairman, Guy Rowling, represent Google, and we fully support this bill and applaud Senator Obenshain on his leadership.
Chairman, on behalf of the Virginia Bar Association, support the bill as well. Thank you.
If anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this, what's the pleasure of the committee? Motion properly seconded, support the bill. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it.
The second bill I've got is Senate Bill 945. This deals with the Commissioners of Account. Last year, the Commissioners of Account and the Judicial Council underwent probably a long overdue review of fees that have been established for a variety of functions undertaken by the Commissioners of Account. Last time, I think that they were reviewed in 1993. The Commissioners came with a very thoughtful report to the Judicial Council, I think over the summer, and at the request, at my request and request of other members of the Judicial Council, they deferred consideration of that until notice was sent out to bar groups and those who were going to be particularly affected by any modifications to the fee schedule. Fee schedules are established primarily by rule and not by statute. And after the feedback was received, which was overwhelmingly in favor of these modifications, statute that provides for statements in lieu of accountings for personal representatives who are the sole distributees of an estate. They can pay a $75 fee for a statement in lieu of an accounting. And this really belongs in the rule with the other fees and not in statute. So what this does is it basically removes this provision from the statute, conforms it with the larger practice of setting these fees by rule with the uniform statement of fees. And with that, that's the explanation I have. I think that Mr. Rust and maybe Mr. Bischoff are here on behalf of the Association of Commissioners of Accounts, if you have any questions.
Any questions for Senator Shane Parsons?
Mr. Chair.
Senator
So
Dees?
this essentially removes the $75 cap.
It does for this, and that fee was set in 1993, and it was part of the overall study.
Any other questions, Senator Shane? I have one. So what is the fee under the uniform fee schedule? Is that correct?
$150.
Anyone like to speak in support of this? Or in opposition? What's the pleasure of the committee? Any operated by motion?
Move to report.
Motion properly seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
Call the roll, please.
Senator Saslow?
No.
Senator Norman? Senator Howell?
No by proxy?
Senator Lucas?
No.
Senator Edwards? Senator Stewart?
Abstain.
Senator Scanlon?
Double that fee, come on.
Senator Reeves?
Abstain about that.
Senator Shaven? Senator Dees?
No.
Senator Sirleaf? Senator Obenshain?
Aye.
Senator McDougal?
He is less
Senator Stanley?
No.
1 yea, 7 nay, 2 abstain.
You all can deal with Mr. Bischoff and former Delegate Russ. Last bill is Senate Bill, oh, that's it? That's it? Good job. And, are we down to one bill? The only other bills left on the docket are
in the state of Virginia. It is female genital mutilation. You have the documents in front of you. I won't go into any more detail than that. But I will say a few things, that there are 140 million women worldwide that suffer from this. 30 million girls under the age of 15 are at risk. They are usually 4 to 12 years old when they receive this procedure without anesthesia or antiseptic. And there is no medical value and no religious reason for the procedure. Now, in the medical community, this is recognized as something that should never be done, and you would have recourse to the Board of Medicine should a physician pursue this. But there is concern that most of these procedures are done by non-medical, non-licensed individuals, and that there should possibly be some civil penalties that are associated with performing this procedure. It's interesting to note that Virginia is the number 4 state in the country for having the incidence of this occur. And so along those lines, we have proposed the legislation that you see before you that allows for civil action. There is federal law that currently exists that prohibits this and allows for punishment, but this would be the opportunity to impose some civil consequences as well, and I'll defer to Senator Black on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Senate Bill 1060, and the bill actually, it does 4 things. It makes it a crime to mutilate a girl under 18, makes it a crime for a parent or legal custodian to consent to the mutilation of a minor, makes it a crime to send the minor out of state for the purposes of mutilation, and it creates a civil cause of action for the victims, allowing compensatory and punitive damages that stretch out for 10 years after the minor reaches the age of 18. Right now, a similar bill has been passed by the U.S. Congress, and similar bills by 24 other states. We are not breaking new ground, although I believe that the civil penalties provision is unique. The reason that I've added that, and this is in amendments, and perhaps we could distribute the amendments at this point.
Yes, sir. One thing I would like to say is that we have duplicate bills here. Senator Black's, which was filed first, and then mine, the intent was rolling out go into this. And I just wanted to, while we were doing amendments.
So move and make the vote, Chief Co-Patriot. Let's take up, we called Siobhan's, let's take up the amendment to it first. Okay. The amendment, there's been a motion to adopt the amendment that's been distributed.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. The amendment is to 1060, my bill.
Is it drawn to the same bill, same language?
I don't know whether the language is precisely identical.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about the amendment? Is there a motion to adopt the amendment? Been moved and seconded to adopt the amendment. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed? All right. Bill is before us. Those who wish to speak in favor of the bill?
We do have people.
What's the federal law? Are we breaking ground in any respect from what the federal government's done?
The only distinction is that we're adding a civil cause of action.
So pretty much the same language as precisely the federal law right now?
It is very similar. You'll find a difference in penalties from state to state, federal government to state. But actually the language itself,
tends to track pretty closely with what federal law is.
Can I ask another question?
May, Senator Deeds.
The reason this occurs is of religious nature.
The religious nature has been addressed. President Obama, through the ambassador at large for global women's issues, put out an extremely strong statement, and he said the U.S. opposes FGM no matter the type, the degree, the severity, the motivation for performing it. It's a serious human rights abuse, gender-based violence, and child abuse. And it says there is no exception for tradition or culture. And this is repeated throughout virtually all of the state bills.
My concern is what is religious.
Right.
It is not. There is no religious base.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Step up. We'll hear brief comments in support and brief comments in opposition.
Yes, my name is Paula Mack, and I'm here as a private citizen, and I urge you to support this bill. Please vote yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Anita Heil in Henrico, Virginia. I ask you to support this bill. People need to be held accountable for this practice, and I do respectfully ask your support. Thank you.
Thank you. In opposition?
Mr. Chairman, one other thing, I'm not sure whether it's told.
We'll come back to you in a second.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, Claire Beth Augustine, I'm on behalf of the ACLU Virginia. We've been talking at the patron about this bill. I wouldn't characterize us as being against it. We're against female genital mutilation. I mean, I know it's going to be for that, but there are some policy issues that are built into the way this is drafted that we would encourage you to look at. You don't want to pass a statute that could be attacked when it's enforced as setting up cruel and unusual penalties. I know the senator has an amendment, but currently one of the penalties would be that a parent who consents to one of these procedures, but the procedure never takes place, would still be subject to 20 life. And even if it's reduced to a class 4 felony, it's still written so that the consent without the procedure ever taking place is a crime, and with a significant penalty. I've been looking at the penalties in the 27 states that have these provisions. Not every state criminalizes the parental behavior, but we believe that it should be, so that's not the issue. But none of the states have penalties that come remotely close to what would be imposed under this bill. Most of them are 4 or 5 years, maybe up to 30. None of them has a fine over 25,000, it says a fine of $1 million. And as the senator pointed out, this is the first state to have a civil action, which is not a bad idea. I mean, they're just policy issues that need, I think, fairly thoughtful reflection in terms of how you want to go about criminalizing and interdicting this behavior. And so I just wanted to bring those to your attention.
Anybody else?
Nicole Weaver on behalf of the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We support the senator's bill because it opposes any form of medically unnecessary surgical modification of female genitalia. So that was the support bill. Thank you.
Counsel, you have comments?
I have what might be an incredibly stupid question, but I've been designated to ask it. The question is whether this would prohibit a sex change operation.
We have any medical professional?
Yes, and the language in this bill is specifically designed for the surgery that has no medical benefit and is associated with mutilation. And I think it says it very clearly in the beginning of the bill. Prohibited, that it is, I'm not finding the line in there, but the specific procedures are delineated, I believe, in the first few lines of the bill. Do you see them? In C, thank you. Gives the exclusions in C.
In C? No. The exclusion in C, Mr. Chairman, is that a surgical operation is not a violation if it's necessary to the health of the person and so on.
I'm sorry, the definition is under A, knowingly circumcises, excises, or infibulates.
And what I don't know, Mr. Chairman, is whether a sex change from female to male requires the excising, for example, of the following.
It's not going to graphic description, it does not.
And I just don't know.
Sharon, do you have the answer to that question?
Yes, sir. And in fact, the clitoral tissue that is used in reconstruction, transitioning from a female to a male, is retained and used in reconstruction. So it is not excised or circumcised or infibulated.
And Mr. Chairman, the same question as regards to the other parts that are described. Labia majora, labia minora, is that similarly retained?
We can certainly take a look at that and make sure that that language is clear. That is definitely not the intent of the bill. And there are 22 other states that have similar language, and this has not come up. But we will be happy to discuss that with you.
Well, let me ask you this, follow up, is this language consistent with the federal statute?
I'd have to look at the precise language, but I think all of the states have pretty well tracked the federal language.
The answer, Mr. Chairman, is it does appear to be consistent with the federal language. What I don't know is if the drafters of federal language or other similar statutes ever asked this question.